And the process carries through not just on set. I mean, the vulnerability is a big piece of acting even before you get to set, right? It's in the audition room, it's on set. But then I think one of the rewarding pieces of getting to see the show as an audience member is seeing how much care was taken after we left set, after we wrapped.
Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Cristina Escobar of Latina Media Co., and I'll be your moderator today. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the stars of Primo. Here with us today, we've got Ignacio Diaz-Silverio. You want to say hi?
Hi.
Hi. Christina Vidal.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Henri Esteve.
Hi.
Carlos Santos.
What's up?
Johnny Rey Diaz.
Hello.
Jonathan Medina.
What's up?
And Efrain Villa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. All of us at once.
All of you. I know there's so many. So first of all, congratulations on the show. I absolutely adored Primo. I have been recommending it to everyone. And my first question for the group is, when did you know that you had something special on your hands?
Day one.
Como?
Day one. As soon as we showed up and we met for the first time, when we started filming, I think we were taking some pictures the first actual day. We were taking some pictures for a montage, but we immediately were all of a sudden we were all dressed in Christmas jammies, and we were vibing by the trailers, and we're like, wow, okay, yeah. This is a family.
The day I wasn't there.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yes, you were.
No, that's
He
awesome.
was not.
Oh,
He was
we
not.
had your double. We had your double.
Yeah.
I really miss him, by the way. I wish he was here.
I was doing great.
So did it immediately feel like a family? Like, how did you all get to know each other? How did you gel as a cast?
It was super easy. I mean, like Carlos said, the day we showed up, you were there the day I'm thinking about, Henry, because you're in a picture. Your arm is around me. I remember, okay?
I was photoshopped.
Remember picture. Okay. No. I know what I remember. I'm not crazy. Okay, let's get back to the question. Okay. Yeah, like the first couple of days, it was like immediate. Like we just, honestly, like we just kind of connected right away, and we just had this banter and this warmth that just came really naturally.
Anybody have anything they want to add to that? Was there any dissenting opinion or feeling?
Dissension? I don't think we had any of that. But I was just gonna say that I think why we all kind of gelled too is I think we all felt like this was gonna be something really special. I think after we met everybody, after we got to meet Shay and talk to him, and we got to read the script, and I think everyone just bought in. Everyone was so grateful to be there, and everyone was so excited for this opportunity that we had, that I think we just all collectively knew that we needed to, be a family for this to work, right? So everything you see on screen as a family is like us actually connecting with each other.
Yeah.
There was a screen test, Christina. There was a screen test that we were taking, and Johnny and I were there on the same day. And when he was doing his pictures, I was running behind him. And at one point, Shay pulled us over and he was like, "Do you guys know each other?" And Johnny and I were like, "No, we just met today."
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So some instant clicks.
That's cool.
I like that.
Yeah.
So as I wrote in my Roger Ebert review of this show, I think Primo is very smart about masculinity. And I wanted to start with asking Ignacio you a question about this and around your portrayal of Rafa. Like, I'm curious about how you built a character who is in the process of building himself, right? Like he's sort of swaying in between the sort of different options. And I wanted to hear how that was for you as a performer to kind of show those movements.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate being asked that question first, as clearly the most masculine of the group. And so I will say, no, I feel like I'm on the cusp of manhood still. Like I'm still trying to navigate that and figure that out. I don't know how, man, you know, I don't know how cognizant I was of that aspect, like while shooting. I certainly was very aware of sort of like the window of time that Rafa is in. And I remember it very distinctly of being at that point in adolescence where, you know, you have to make some pretty big decisions, the biggest decisions you've made in your life up until that point. And you know, I remember, like I said, I remember it very distinctly in my own life. It's a period in time where every adult in your life is inundating you with advice. Well-intentioned as it may be, it's quite disorienting. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, clearly as a 16-year-old like Rafa is, but beyond that, like, you know, it's not just true for teenagers, it's true for any person. Like, you're always constantly trying to, at least me up until this point, like, you know, come into yourself, find yourself, and like try to find your own place in life and like your own path, as it were, like Mondo says. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
it helps. It gets there, gets close.
I'm glad we've established I'm the man of the group.
Well, so now for each of the 5 of you who are playing an uncle, I want to hear from each of you about how you would describe your character's take on masculinity and whether you as a person, how you sort of agree or disagree with that take. Who wants to start?
I mean, I guess Mike will take it. I think Mike is, when I read it, I looked at Mike as just like the epitome of toxic masculinity, like with all the parts that don't really hurt other people, right? It's like his allergy to vulnerability, his like doubling down on everything, his like inability to get in the vicinity of any sort of emotion that makes him not strong or taken serious or not a potential leader. So I don't agree with a lot of Mike's behaviors. I do find them really funny. Like I think growing up in Miami, there were a lot of like machismo old Cuban men that I would see and like would circle my life, and they were very similar behaviors. A lot of that was based on them. Like I was doing the beginning versions of Mike were very inspired by someone I had grown up with. That I keep trying not to say his name, and Carlos keeps pushing for it. But
Dragon.
But yeah, I think Primo ends up being, in my head, about Rafa breaking generational cycles. And I think that is the relationship to masculinity that gets broken, and he becomes significantly better than all of us because of it. So that was my take with masculinity on it.
I think Mondo would probably challenge the question itself, right? Like masculinity is a social construct and therefore does not have all the bearing that we put on it and all that weightiness. And I think he would just he would be much more inclined to like not talk about masculinity because it seems so limiting to his universal worldview, emphasis on universe with, you know, a capital U. Yeah. How does that contrast with my beliefs? Yeah, sure. I believe that too. I do like definitions just because I like wielding words, and I think it's important to be able to arrive at language that describes things, especially abstract concepts like masculinity. And I'm not one to cling too hard to universe or at all. That's not my worldview. But in terms of like deconstructing the definitions of masculinity, absolutely.
Well, Mondo at least celebrates the physical male form, right?
Yeah, very much so, yes. Commercially and philosophically, yes.
Yeah.
Love it. Johnny, you're next.
From the perspective of Rolly, I think if someone was like, you know, if he was to say, what is masculinity? He'd be like, I don't know what that is. What does that word mean? The character would probably be like, what? What'd you call me? But Rolly also, he embodies, because he is in and out of skirmishes, in and out of jail. He does often have that sort of like, quick to throw fist. You could call it toxic masculinity if you wanted to. But I think what's interesting about him is that he also has this other side of him, these other shades that I think is just a credit to Shea, when he was writing this character, is that we get to really see all these other sides of Rolly, this vulnerable side, this sensitive side, this guy that has had all this life experience, and he has moments where he's actually really trying to impart wisdom into Rafa based on his own, shortcomings. And that's what I really like about that character. And I find so interesting. And it's not just this two-dimensional thing that you see on screen. He says a goofy line or whatever. There's a lot more to him than just meets the eye, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, he's definitely layered. He dropped some unexpected wisdom, right, throughout the show. All right, Carlos, what do you got for me?
Let me take it away. More than meets the eye. I love it. I would say that for Uncle Ryan, he's just in a constant pursuit of status. I think that's where the machismo kind of presents itself for him, because I don't think he has any trouble in terms of like vulnerability or emotion, but you can tell that insecurity of trying to find some kind of status in a hierarchy of like male hierarchy situation with like a car. It's an old car, but he's trying to find a symbol with the BMW, with the Beamer. He's trying to work a job that feels like, it's bank. In his mind, he's Gordon Gekko. And I think the journey that I kind of like understood right away. I don't feel like, for me personally, I was coming in from like I mentioned before, like the insecurity of being the youngest and wanting to be validated and heard. But obviously, of Uncle Ryan trying to find those symbols was the way to go and the journey to take, and that kind of informs how Uncle Ryan reacts and what he says and how he sees life. So it was a nice little pathway for me to go into when I was forming him from my loins.
All right.
Okay, so Jonathan, I'm glad you're last on this question, because I feel like in many ways your character plays the most, right? In some ways the most traditional, but also like such a softie. So tell us about how you shaped him and how you relate.
Jay wouldn't talk about masculinity.
Here we go.
And we're done.
Question.
He doesn't have to talk about masculinity. It's about how he would define what it is to be a man, which I do.
Honestly, the idea that he does rather than says is probably the biggest way in which the old school masculinity sort of plays out in the Jay character, because he's kind of a patriarch, at least in his own mind. He tends to just put the nose to the grindstone and provide as much as he can, and when he can do it in the way of advice, he will. But most of the time, he's just trying to provide for his family, both his immediate family and his wife and kids, in the best way that he can, and that's usually just hard work. So he tends to get lost in that a little bit, but he's got so much love that he doesn't know how to express. And I think that's where it's almost like an uncontrolled or a contained rage. He's like a rage of love. So a lot of the lines they find humor because it's like, I love you. Don't you know that already? I think that tends to play into a lot of old school masculinity. Instead of being able to be expressive, you hold it all inside. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, switching gears, Christina, you're obviously bringing the feminine energy in so many of the scenes, but also, being able to play with the boys. And so I want to hear about how you sort of built Drea and how it felt, embodying that space and holding your own against all these dudes here.
Drea, she reminds me of the women in my family. And so I feel like I already knew her. She was already in me, even though that's not necessarily my personality as far as being like the strong, resourceful one, the glue, the rock, like that's more my sister of our siblings. But like I said, with my mom and my titis and everybody I grew up around, my grandmothers, I kind of already knew who Drea was. And in my family, the women were always the strong ones, and the center and the glue and the rock, like I said. And so especially for the men. And a lot of times Hispanic women tend to baby the men in the family. And so I didn't feel intimidated by all these guys, probably for that reason. But also because they all did such a good job of making me feel like I was the queen bee. Like they really did. They spoiled me. Ignacio was teasing me at ATX, but I was like, they were always just being nice to me and telling me I was pretty and giving me all this attention and making me laugh. And I was like, this is great. Like I could be here every day. But yeah, they all kind of in their own way treated me like I was their sister. And Ignacio treated me like I was his mom. He gave me that kind of respect, that honor. He gave me that permission to be warm with him and affectionate. And so it was just, they just all made my job really easy in that way. And I never felt like, oh, this is like too much masculine energy. I mean, if anything, I enjoyed it too much. Not to be gross.
Oh, I like that. You know, one of the things that I really appreciate about this show is how it balances like laughs with heart. And I think that's like a signature of Mike Schur, right? You see that in all of his shows, that sort of like earnestness, but also just like the comedy of it. Yeah. And so I wanted to hear from you as actors, like, how did you find that balance between like making sure you land the joke, get the laugh, but then also portray that sweetness that is underneath so much of it?
I really have to credit the writing. Like it was just there. It was there in the writing and in the storytelling. And then there was just a natural warmth between all of us. Like no one, at least I never felt, no one was ever trying to outshine anyone or like outact anyone or anything. And so we were all naturally connecting on screen. And then it was just like already there, you know? So I mean, at least for me personally, I didn't feel like I had to find that. And I also feel like the best comedy is really grounded, is when you're not trying to play the funny, you're just playing the truth. You're just playing the truth. Thank you. Yeah. And then it ends up being funny because it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I felt like we were in really good hands. The writing, the directing, everybody in, you know, behind the camera. And so for me, and I might have said it to y'all at some point during the production, I feel like it just, for me, it makes me relax into it because I know that I'm going to be taken care of. A lot of times actors are in projects that are not necessarily like, you feel like, oh, this is not great, whether it's for the writing or the way that it works. So it puts us in like in survival mode where like, well, I have to, you know, it's almost like I have to make sure that I don't look like an idiot, or I don't, you know, it's it's an extra amount of energy that you spend in the wrong place. But from one also, I felt like I could just give it my go. I could try what I was feeling, and I know that it was going to go into the proper through the proper channels and in good hands, and they shaped everything that we did. And I mean, looking back at all the takes that they ended up with, you know, it was a confirmation that they had it. We just had to come in and be as open as possible and bring in our end, and they could, you know, they more than held their end of the bargain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just like to echo what Carlos said, like they did Shay and like Lisa and Peter, and they did such a good job of making it just a safe space where everything felt so collaborative. And I remember there was specifically, you know, the first week or 2 weeks of shooting, I had conversations with Shay because there was moments where, you know, when I was playing Rolly, where I felt like I was being too over the top or it was too much. And those are conversations I had with him where he would say, hey, no, like, it's good. Like, you have to just trust me. Like, if it's something doesn't feel right, I'm going to tell you. And I think that gave me a lot more permission to sort of just be and just do my job and not focus on what they're supposed to do, you know? So they just created such a really positive environment. And also, you know, we had this great cast of like very professional working actors that are all very talented, and, you know, they know what they're doing. And so like, there was times where we would be doing certain scenes and someone would just like serve you up, you know, for a home run. You know what I mean? It wasn't like they were trying to steal the light or anything like that. It was just like, we're here to just create something really cool. We know it's special, so let's just work together.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like, it is true. Like, it's very much a Mike Schur staple, right? And it's also like a Shea Serrano staple. Like, it's a shared sensibility that they have. And I think what's a little bit different about our show as opposed to like other Mike Schur shows is that I think we're used to his shows like as a like workplace comedy, and this is a family comedy, and because of that dynamic, I think we're able to get to that place like much quicker in the show where you really like beyond the sort of like absurdist comedy of it all, you really grow to care about the characters in a much deeper way. And playing Rafa, I mean, I was certainly very aware of the fact that, like, you know, the vessels for the comedy are mostly like the uncles, right? And Rafa's maybe more so of like or at least my job was a little bit more so of what you would call, I guess, like a straight man, or being like a surrogate for the audience in navigating that chaos. And so I was certainly really aware of like never wanting to reach for a joke, never wanting to go too far into the space that maybe they were playing in, because of that. You wanted to, like, I don't know, ground the thing so that like the really out there bizarre sort of like humor could land, like had a place to land. And it's interesting that you, like, I think one of the last words you said in your question was sweetness, like the sweetness of the show, which is really interesting because like the note or the thing that Shea would say to me the most by far was stay sweet in your chest. He'd always be like, stay sweet in your chest, you know? And Lisa Muse Bryant, one of our executive producers and writers, would also always be like, you're the sweetest boy on television, you know? They were constantly reminding me to like, be sweet, stay sweet. And that's, yeah. And beyond, like, yeah, I think our show like has that, you know, that very familiar sort of like just incredible, like, you know, Mike Schur sensibility of like, you know, just the funniest, like, I don't know, just the funniest characters and the funniest like circumstances you can think of. But that also very grounded, like heartfelt thing that cuts beyond that and gives you like real, and this is a testament to Shea and to him and just to absolutely everyone in the writer's room. Like, these people have, you know, there are real emotional lives and there are real emotional arcs, and yeah, I think you very quickly grow to care about the characters in like a hopefully a much deeper way.
And the process carries through not just on set. I mean, the vulnerability is a big piece of acting even before you get to set, right? It's in the audition room, it's on set. But then I think one of the rewarding pieces of getting to see the show as an audience member is seeing how much care was taken after we left set, after we wrapped. There was still a lot of diligent effort with very talented editors and that amazing wizardry of the post-production process that carried that same ethos of let's make sure that everyone's protected. Let's make sure that we don't betray that vulnerability at any point. And I think that's also what leads all of us to be so proud of the final product, is knowing that you were a part of a very strong collective endeavor.
I want to pick up on something that Ignacio said. So, you know, Primo is in many ways Rafa's coming of age story, but I feel like each of the grownups, and part of what made the show work so well is each of the grownups has some arch, you know, too. Like, each of you come to a realization, maybe not like a big change, not like the ones that you're doing when you're 16 and trying to figure out your life, but that still there was sort of growth for everybody. And I wanted to hear you speak sort of as actors about how you charted that growth, you know, to keep the character true to sort of their core nugget, but also show like that little bit of change, that little bit of growth that is so satisfying as an audience member to watch. I'll call on you if you don't.
Awesome.
I think, are you taking that? I think for Mike specifically, the thing that makes Mike the most annoying through the first 7 episodes or 6.5 episodes ends up being the thing that helps Rafa the most. And I think there's a point where for him, you can see it where he realizes he doesn't have to fight quite as hard. I don't know if that would ever stick with him, but like momentarily, he has a moment there with Rafa in episode 7, I think, by the truck. When he finally is like, yo, Maya likes you. And I know that because I'm a military guy and I'm a man and I'm the toughest. And I think there, hopefully it sticks with him for a little longer than just episode 8. But I think there's a moment where he stops feeling like he needs to fight so hard to be taken seriously.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I have a moment like that with all the uncles. I think where like they each get to like actually help me out in a much sort of in a much realer way, and that was always very special to have that moment individually with like each of the uncles. But sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. My bad.
That's all right. No, okay. I think I'm gonna echo also like what Henry's saying, because I feel like we're all the reason why we're so the character the uncles are so loony is the word. I think we all come from like a place of at least for me, for Uncle Ryan, like that insecurity that manifests, for Uncle Mike, it's like being tough and being all these things, and for me and for Uncle Ryan, it's also like trying to prove that he's good, which I think it manifests itself in being annoying and grating and pompous. But I think you kind of see the veneer of like, this is a mask that he feels like he needs to put on. And I feel like there's a little bit of like, that's going to be the journey for Uncle Ryan moving forward, as you can see is softening as the episodes go by, where I feel like at first he's putting it on so thick. And then as things are happening, he starts to, I think there's a little bit of like that trajectory where he's like, maybe the mask doesn't have to be on all the time. I mean, obviously. And I think that's the only thing that's, if anything, it makes him bearable, is that you see that he's not like that all the time, that it really comes from a place of just insecurity. But he has real moments with everybody. So I feel like that's, for at least for Uncle Ryan, that's the journey for him.
And hopefully Claudia is involved in that future journey.
Yeah, he's got a lot of romantic.
I think you get to see that as Rafa grows and accepts who he is, and listen, it's the first season, like I think there's going to be so much more. But as you see him sort of crack the surface of beginning to accept who he is, you kind of see the uncles learning to do that too. Andrea, as even her, I mean, I think we can talk about this now. I got in trouble. But her, what we end up finding out at the end about her and her a relationship. Like I do think that part of that was inspired by watching Rafa and Maya and like going, you know what, if I want my kid to do this, I need to do it. If I want to encourage him to let love in, then I need to take a chance to. And so you kind of, it's cool because we're all giving him advice. We're all trying to help him, but all the while he's helping us and teaching us, and we're kind of learning and growing and changing from watching him. And again, I think that's just all in the writing, like, but excellent writing.
Yeah, one of the cool parts about Primo is just in the way that it begins, right? It's such a brusque drop into this universe. And in order for that to work, I think you have to play into a lot of those natural instincts that all of us inherently know. We know that sibling relationships are difficult. History is littered with brothers acting badly, Cain and Abel, Remus and Romulus, etc. And we all inherently know that, siblings are your first allies and your first competitors. And what you see take place here with these 5 very strong personalities is you don't have to do a lot of imagining to see how they got to be what they are. They each had to carve out a space for themselves in a very, very crowded household, in a literal and figurative sense crowded. And so I think that's also why the personalities are so entrenched, right? And so so well defined. It's because they had to be, because with all the chaos and with all the uncertainty and with all the things that are not defined, at least each character has to find a way to define themselves.
Yeah. I mean, just I guess to speak on Rolly, I think that Rolly has like this sort of this like childlike innocence. And I think he masks a lot of it by, throwing a fist and sort of proving that he's a strong person. But, as the season progresses, you kind of start to see that like all those situations described in the show where he gets into a fight or Mike picks him up from jail, or something happens is because he's protecting somebody. The whole thing with Leatherman and the cow, he's protecting Mondo, right? He's stepping up for what he believes is right. And I think that that's at the core, that's just who he is. He's a person that, as cliche as it sounds, family over everything, for him is what it comes down to. And he's one of the few uncles in the show that doesn't have a specific, tug on Rafa. Like, everyone else is telling him, hey, go to the military, college, this and that. And he's the one that's like, hey, just do what makes you happy, and that's what's going to make me happy. And along the way, you see him sort of change in terms of, he's made a lot of bad decisions in his life. And there's a lot of scenes with Primo where he's like telling him like, hey, you don't know what it's like. This is what it was like for me. So I'm trying to have you avoid this going down this road, So I think that's just really cool that, they really gave the character so many layers and dimension. And, hopefully if we get a season 2, then we get to explore all these characters again, because it was a lot of fun.
It's interesting that you say that like he's the one that doesn't have a tug on Rafa, and maybe this is just a lesson in like how you influence someone in life. But as we see like at the end of the pilot, through that perspective of being like, you're going to be okay. You just have to decide what is best for you, what's right for you. Don't worry about your mom. Don't worry about us. Like, we've been here. We got each other. We're fine. That is ultimately the tug on Rafa, right? So that does end up being like at least the last sort of like catalyst for being like, okay, I guess I'll do what I want to do. And yeah, that just goes back to like what I was saying after Henry's comments, just like as much terrible advice as Rafa gets from the uncles, there is always a moment of like very, genuine and actually quite profound sort of like, advice.
Mm-hmm.
I think, there's a lot of wisdom here, and I think you've heard a lot. I think I would also challenge Johnny by saying one of the dynamics that I see play out between you become like, he presents you with an opportunity to be like a dad or an uncle or an older brother, something that you're not normally accustomed to doing, right? Because of your love for him and your concern for him, you end up embodying that role for him. And I think that changes you. And we see that change throughout the series. And I think one of the beautiful, magical components of the writing and the acting and everything, and what I think so many people are going to identify with in the show, is that because it's a family show, whether you're, 8 or 9 or 10 years old on the precipice of going through what Rafa's going through at his age and going through it in this moment, or older than him and having gone through it, and it brings back memories of that or gives you an opportunity to relive it. There's something for everybody in this show because they're a family first. We all get to identify with it, right? My neighbors, we had a watch party with them, and they're from the Middle East, and they said that I know every single one of those uncles. right? It didn't matter that we were Latino because there was identifying components in their cultures, in the dynamic and the genetic makeup of who these uncles are and who Drea is and who Rafa is. And the one, I'm not going to call them out, the one person said, it brought me back to being a teenager. And it was beautiful to be able to watch that and see him sort of, navigate through all of these different avenues before him and ultimately have an environment that allowed him to make that decision. And that's what's really beautiful about it. It's also, Ignacio, you and Drea are the heart of the show. We bounce. Listen, you can disagree with me all you want. When I watch the show,
I'll agree that Drea
you and Drea always, we bounce off of you. You're the lighthouse, right? We're the waves, and Drea is the lighthouse keeper. And the two of you, every time I've watched the show now 3 times through, and every time it's the two of you that always bring me to tears. That's the thing I have in common with Jay. I have a fleece and I like to cry.
Which one of us is Willem Dafoe and who's Robert Pattinson?
That's what I was about to say. But then being like a movie, we probably don't want to be that.
I don't want to be William.
Conversation offline.
I think one of the
something else that I want to talk about, which is just how Latino the show is. I mean, like, just look at all of us. Yeah. And so I feel like there's a tension there because it's like, we can do anything, we can be anyone. There's a huge variety in the uncles, and there's a lot of universal themes in Primo. Pero también there's something really important about having the texture of the show be so, I'm going to say particularly Chicano, particularly Texas. Like, I don't know, for audience members out there who haven't been to San Antonio, like, it is a very Mexican town. And so this is a really particular setting and a really particular moment. And it's exciting to sort of see that period on screen. But I wanted to hear from you as actors, how you sort of navigate that, how you select parts, whether it's like wanting to play more Latino characters or feeling boxed in by that, or how do you sort of navigate that kind of like cultural aspect of, I'm making somebody laugh over here. How do you navigate that sort of cultural aspect of the Latinidad and the big conversations that Hollywood is having around representation and sort of what our community can and can't be on screen?
I'm laughing because you're assuming we have so many choices.
Yeah.
That's the answer. That's the answer. You gotta.
Hey, speak for yourself, Jonathan. The script really called out to me.
I am absolutely speaking for myself. Nobody else. This is just me.
No, I'm fully kidding. I get that question a lot. I was like, I got an audition and I was like, yes, I will audition. Thank you. And then they were, I'm going to shut up. Yeah.
I think we're all looking forward to having that problem. I think we're all kind of in a place where, as of right now, it's a case-by-case scenario because, I've done a couple things with Gentefied and stuff, but I generally just started being in this position of like working. So for me, it's been the longer part of my career has been searching and just wanting to work. So it's still not too far from me. And specifically that opportunity is like, now it begins to have a shift in us. And we're like, oh, now hopefully we can be in a position where we can say, hey, I want to do this. I want to do that. So I look forward to see where this takes all of us collectively.
That being said,
no, go ahead.
I just want to say, if I did have choices, I would have this is still a dream project. Like, no matter what, you know what I mean? Even if I was privileged enough to be sitting on a throne being like, not this script, yes, this one. Like, are you the people involved? Like, and the story we get to tell. I mean, I just want to be clear, like, even if I did have that sort of agency.
I don't know. It sounds like if you had a choice, you would pass. Just kidding.
I think there was only one thing recently, which obviously I won't talk about what it is. Jonathan knows because we had to talk about it. But where I was like, I'm not really interested in playing this portrayal of a Hispanic family or Hispanic role. And again, nobody was offering me anything. It was like still at the audition process, but I was like, I'm just not comfortable with telling this story, because it did kind of feel like, in a number of ways, not just for Hispanics, for women, for family, for all of those things, it felt like it was taking steps back. And I was just like, I don't know. I don't think I want to be a part of telling this story. But again, I don't feel like that often about a lot of things, Hispanic or like, it was just that one role where I was like, you know what? I think we've seen this enough for me. And I don't know. That was one of many reasons that I chose not to audition for that. But yeah, no, I'm with everyone else where I'm just kind of like, I'm so glad that we're getting opportunities to play roles that aren't necessarily written specifically Hispanic. It could be it could be any race. Is that the right word? Sorry.
It could be. I just want to say that I think what we're hinting at, and then the root of it all is the responsibility that we have as a community with roles and shows. That's, I think, what we should not partake in. I think we should be at a place, and we're working towards a place where our representation is not under, it's like so much pressure and so much we should be, we're moving towards a place where we can do these shows and not have be like, well, that's not factual. Well, that doesn't represent. And that's hopefully, I feel like that's the root of that, the pressure of having to be the voice of, because again, we're not a monolith. And so that, I think that's what we should strive towards, is just take that responsibility off and just have the opportunity to tell all the stories and have everybody appreciate them equally.
Yeah.
I also think once diversity, and specifically Latino on screen, gets to a number that is somewhere close to the census number, those stories and those stereotypes will stop being there so much, right? We're at 7.7%, I think, of all speaking roles on TV or film are Latino. America is 19% Latino. And I think that that enormous gap leaves so much room for stereotypes and sort of caricatures of Latino characters rather than a family that happens to be Latino. And I think the most Latino thing we do in season 1 is make Mexican food. I don't think there's really any other references to being Mexican. Maybe Rafa has some with the college program, but
he just says that I come from struggle. Which is more a thing about class, I think.
Yeah.
And that representation would be not just on the optical representation, right, of what we're seeing. A lot of it is in what we don't see, because as an actor, sure, you have a lot of control, and that's where the art and the creativity and the magic comes from, and being able to have agency. But that agency is limited. You're still being directed. And those directors are still beholden to producers. And so it's also representation at those levels, right? Mm-hmm. At the writer's level, at the producer's level, at the director's level. And that's what was so beautiful about Primo specifically, is that those behind the scenes characters were also incredibly integrated into Latinidad, however that's defined.
Yeah.
That also, I think, shout out to Mike Schur for being able to, and having the reins on a project like this, handing them over to Shay, being like, it's your creation, it's your show, hire who you need. I'm with you to hire everybody. I'm with you in all these meetings. I will guide you as much as I can. But it's not Mike getting into the EP chair and being like, cool, I'm a white man from Boston, and I'm going to tell a Texas Mexican story that I don't know about and imagine I did, right? He handed it over to Shay. And I think that just speaks to Mike and the rest of the team.
Yeah. I think all of those are great points. And to just sort of piggyback and support what everyone else is saying is I think when we talk about representation, sometimes in the conversation, we actually miss the mark. To Efrain's point, when we focus exclusively on just representation, I think we give too much room for the powers for the powers that be to make it about optics, right? And I think when you focus on inclusion, representation takes care of itself. And I think that's a little bit of what we're talking about is like everyone behind the scenes, like the behind the scenes of this, like we are all the people that populate this fictional world and like understand it and know how to tell this story are the same. You know, it's the same on screen and behind the camera. Like every single one of our writers is Hispanic, I think, maybe with the exception of like one. And not just, you know, this is the family that's like the main sort of central focus of the show. But even outside of that, it's like, you know, my love interest is like a Black girl. My friends are Filipino. Like when we see Christina like at work, you know, she's, it's everywhere in the show. You go to the doctor, it's a Black woman. It's everywhere. It's in the background actors. It's everywhere in the show. And that's I think happens when the primary focus first is on inclusion and on telling the story that you're telling like honestly and authentically. And also I'll say like to the point Carlos was making is like about having to be everything for everyone is like having to, you know, we can't represent like every single shade of, you know, Hispanic person in every single experience and be everything for everyone. Like, you know, and luckily we don't have to anymore. Like we're not the only show with a Hispanic cast. Like Christina and I were just at ATX TV Festival and we had the privilege of participating in like the Cheers reunion script read. And Chris Estrada from This Fool played Cliff. And like I had a great moment with him where we got to talk about like, you know, his show and our show. And like Debbie Wolf, who's a writer on our show, is a showrunner for Lopez versus Lopez. And like we're not the only ones, right? And so that's a huge thing is, you know, our show, which I think this point has been made, is not specifically about being Hispanic. There's no moment in the show where any of the characters do a little tap dance for the audience about like, this is what it's like to be Latino in America. Like, you know, like it's, you know, it's an American family, it's a Texan family, and we just so happen to be of a certain ethnicity.
Although I have to say, Ignacio, the fact that they've chosen the array of professions, I think there is something that says we are a Latino family and there's somebody in the military and there's somebody who works an administrative job. There's somebody who's a philosopher. There's somebody who's a small business owner. Like we have a wide,
you just call
our doctors, we are lawyers, we are politicians. Like
what about me?
You know, this has a really nice smattering of what it means to be Latino.
But devoid of stereotype. Though.
Yeah, which is really nice. It's really nice.
I think they're gonna just touch on what everyone's sort of saying too, is that like, if you just look at like this Zoom call, we all look different. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the point is that like Latinos come in all different colors and sizes. You know what I mean? We are so diverse and so mixed. So it's not just like, you know, we're Mexican, Cuban, Puerto Rican, whatever it is, where like we just all look so different and we can play so many different things. You know, we don't specifically have to just be a Latino character in something. Like I personally, when I book a part and the character has like a very Anglo name, I'm like, yes, let's go. You know what I mean? Because it's like we're actors too at the same time, and we are so capable of playing so many different types of parts. We shouldn't just be stuck to one specific thing, you know? I
mean, yes, but like one time I had an audition for Mary Beth and I was like, okay. I was like, time out. Pendulum.
Maria.
Like,
they changed the name of the role.
I doubt anyone named me Mary Beth. Like, you know, it's you know, sometimes it's like, just let the Caucasian person take this one. It's fine. It's totally fine.
I have to tell you, I have two sisters and they both have names like Mary Beth.
Are you serious? No, you don't.
Point.
Offline.
My real name is Kyle.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. It isn't.
My name is Gavin. I don't know. Ignacio. My name is Gavin. Gavin Jackson.
Gavin. You actually do look like a Gavin, but
But see, even to that point, like I have a lot of cousins that are from Mexico, and if you see them, they have red hair and green eyes. You know what I'm saying? It's like they look like they could be white, and so that's the point, is that we come and we're so mixed. You know what I'm saying? And we can do so many different things, not just because of our name must we play a certain thing, or So
it's really cool. I think. Oh, sorry to interrupt you, Johnny. I think that's also why the show is resonating with people, is because it's doing that. It's that scenario that everyone always talks about. What does it look like when people get to tell their own story? And I think this is an example of what that looks like.
I was going to say that identity is important, but it's not primary, and I think that's what makes it work. It's secondary and sometimes tertiary. And I don't know what the fourth version of that sounds like.
Quartiary? I don't know either.
But I think that's what it is. I think for a long time, we've had to work in spaces where the identity is the thing that we are dealing with. And so the more that we separate from that responsibility is when we'll actually be able to play Mary Sue's or Mary Elizabeth's or whatever the.
All right, never mind. Mary Beth.
I appreciate about how Latinidad is the texture of the show, but not the substance, right? You get to really
way better
across.
Ooh, nice.
You're a writer.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm feeling that.
And so you really do see that and you feel it, and it's beautiful. And for somebody who partakes in some of that texture as a Chicana myself, it's like also feels really affirming to be like, yes, it is nice to see some of those practices represented, but I also don't think it's alienating because it's not so specific. So we are at time. So I want to say thank you. I want to say on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, process, and craft with your fellow performers. Thank you. Congrats again on Primo. I wish you all the success. And I can't wait to watch that 6th season where Rafa's graduating from college.
He got held back.
I know I've talked too much. I just want to say, I've seen countless SAG Foundation interviews with my heroes, and to do this one specifically, this outlet is actually a really special moment for me. So thank you so much for
thank you.
But really, I genuinely, so thank you for letting us do this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christina.
You're welcome.